Welcome back to The Loop, your weekly dose of all things property management. I'm your host, Collin Stewart, and each week we're going to dive into the latest trends, strategies, and stories shaping the property management world. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, we're here to provide insights, expert interviews, and practical tips to help you navigate the ever-evolving landscape of property management. Welcome back to The Loop, your weekly dose of all things property management. I'm your host, Collin Stewart, and each week we're going to dive into the latest trends, strategies, and stories shaping the property management world. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, we're here to provide insights, expert interviews, and practical tips to help you navigate the ever-evolving landscape of property management. In today's episode, we're joined by Andrew Easler of Easler Law to talk about the legal and practical realities of short-term rentals. We'll explore the advantages and disadvantages, recent regulatory changes, common pitfalls, and what property managers need to know when stepping into the space. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Collin.
Thanks for joining. Let's talk about short-term rentals.
Yeah, so I just want to give my legal disclaimer because I am an attorney. I have to say, hey, speak with an attorney. I'm not giving anybody specific legal advice here, but we can talk about some general rules and hopefully it will get you thinking and going in the right direction.
So advantages, disadvantages of short-term from a legal perspective.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously as an attorney, I want to look holistically and balance the interests for my client, right? Of course, my client's number one desire is to make money if this is an investment. So I have to keep that in mind. Of course, if I didn't care about that, then I'd say no to everything that my clients would want to do, right? So we always have to temper that against what the risks are. So in terms of short-term rentals, versus long-term rentals, the revenue is generally going to be higher, right? Or at least the potential revenue. If you're fully occupied on a short-term rental, you're going to make more money than you're fully occupied under a long-term rental. So that's certainly what attracts investors. But there's a lot of things to consider on the other side, because once you step up to the short-term rental market, everything starts changing. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, depending on where you're located, you may have a state law that addresses what you need to do. You may also have a county law. You may also have a local town law, and you may even have a local HOA, COA, POA, owners association that restricts what you can do and how you can do it.
And I heard there's also, I think you mentioned some new taxes coming in Florida in October.
Yeah. So in October, we actually just got rid of the commercial sales tax on commercial rentals. So that's going out the window. So that's always fun.
Handy. Uncertainty creates change, creates billable hours, which is maybe not bad from your perspective, but a huge amount of complexity for everybody else.
Yeah, it was a little bit weird because I think Arizona at some point in the past had it, but I think Florida is one of the only states that actually charge tax on commercial leases. So foreign investors, we have quite a lot of them here. Foreign meaning from outside of the state come here and say, what do you mean I have to pay sales tax on commercial lease? That's crazy. Yeah. So that confusion certainly seems to have been well received with this new change coming in October.
I do think anytime you're dealing with an extremely large organization, whether it's Airbnb, Vrbo, Uber, anybody like that, I imagine they've got a pretty robust legal team, and their terms of service, you may not have read them, but you certainly clicked the button that said I read them and I agreed to them. I don't imagine there's much room to challenge, especially for, even if you did have a valid case, the just sheer, it seems daunting to go up against, one of their legal teams as an individual consumer. Talk to me about how you think about, your clients and, whether or not it strategically makes sense. Is it just carte blanche, don't do it ever? Or are there some cases where you've thought about it?
Yeah, so it's got to be worth it for the client. Fortunately, in the state of Florida, where I reside currently, we have consumer protection laws like the Florida Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act, also known as FDUPTA, which kind of make it worthwhile for a consumer who's been severely burned by deceptive or unfair trade practices to justify hiring an attorney to go after them. But of course, the practices can't just be, things that you didn't like or outcomes or decisions that they made that maybe were on the wrong basis. It's got to be extreme enough that it's fully deceptive or entirely unfair, right? It's got to rise to that threshold level. And most of the time, we're not seeing that, right? We've got a situation where, guest says X, Y, and Z happened. The host says, no, that didn't happen. Here's the video. And then Airbnb decides, well, I find the guest to be more credible, and I'm just going to give them their money back.
Mm.
Okay. And even though there's a mountain of evidence to the contrary over here, we've got people who maybe even aren't legally trained that are making these decisions on the back end. And I'm not singling Airbnb out. It's across all of these other host platforms. It appears, right? When we get the margins start thinning, right, for these kinds of things, they start
Mm.
outsourcing and getting people who maybe aren't as open to other ideas and working through these problems, maybe getting a little bit too many cases to deal with at
Mm.
once. And so the question is, do you want to escalate it even higher for $1,300, right? When you have to pay an attorney, on top of that, you're not going to get your money back on those things. That's kind of the problem. So instead of continuing and fighting the problem, they just decide I can control long-term rentals a lot better, and my future potential is going to be better off there.
Totally. Yeah, it gets to the point where it's just not worth it. Have you seen anything recently that you could speak to that you found that was worth challenging?
For me, it would be worth challenging, and it was a similar situation to the one I gave you before. I can't give you any specifics, otherwise I'd be breaching my privilege with the client. But maybe I can get one of my clients and convince them to come on your show and tell you the whole story, because this person's got a lot of fun stories. But yeah, it's pretty similar to what we talked about, and it financially, if you're not about just the principle of things, and you really are just looking at it as a business mindset, you got to cut your losses and move on, rather than paying a whole bunch of money to an attorney to go fight over $1,400.
This is why I have somebody who sits in between me and my lawyer, and it's our controller. And she's like, Collin, no, we're not going to chase that. I'm like, but, no, she's like, it's not worth it. You're not going to get your money back on it. I'm like, but I'm still angry. She's like, okay, be angry about it.
Yep.
Totally. I wonder if there's anything that somebody listening, if they are doing short-term rentals, are there any things that you can do to protect yourself kind of ahead of time?
Yeah. So obviously, if you end up with a dispute with a guest, I think is what they are officially called. If you have a dispute with a guest that stays with you, it's very good to have recordings of any of the conversations that you've had. So of course, in the state of Florida, we're a two-party consent state. That means that if you're going to record somebody, you have to let them know and get their consent. If they do not consent, it's not admissible in court. So keep things in writing, right? So if they're going to say, hey, I want to stay an extra 3 days, make sure to update it through the system, and that they're utilizing that system to pay you. If you go outside of that system, the system can't help you. Right. If you say, oh, give me $150 cash and I'll give you an extra 3 days, that's not going to be something that's going to be covered by, Airbnb's insurance program. And, we laugh and we chuckle, but that's only probably because of our experience. We've seen that, right? I think in 1985, if somebody was staying in your house and said, I'll give you an extra $150, I don't think anybody would chuckle at somebody agreeing to do that. I think that's kind of showing you the nature of how things have changed in our culture. But these days now we got to have everything in writing or in a recording that's properly consented to.
I'm curious, what other things should property managers consider when they're structuring an agreement with an owner to protect themselves?
Yeah, so probably the number one problem most property managers are going to run into with investors and landlords that they work with doing short-term rentals is getting too deep. Okay, so let me give you an example. Guest comes in, they trash the place. Okay, they leave. And now we got to go in and fix stuff. Okay. It ends up costing, because you had to get a plumber out last minute. You got somebody else coming in. You got a call out fee. Maybe you had to get an electrician in, get an AC person coming in. You got $1,700. Okay. Who's going to pay for that? Right. Most of the time, the property manager is like, okay, I'll take care of it. Put it on my invoice, take it out of the profit. Maybe that guest cancels. Maybe there's not enough profit still sitting in the account to cover these expenses that you've just covered. And now you go back to the landlord and say, hey, I went out of pocket $2,500 to fix these things that came in. We have not gotten paid from the guest for all of these costs. We have a claim that's still going through with AirDNA and Airbnb's insurance program or VRBO's program. Pay me back. And the landlord says, you shouldn't have done that. I don't know why you got an AC person to come in last minute. I could have gotten somebody else in 5 minutes and they wouldn't have charged me that amount. That plumber shouldn't have been that much, et cetera, et cetera. And now you've got a dispute with a landlord between the property manager and you're just trying to do your job and provide good customer service, but now you're deep in the hole paying all these expenses on behalf of a landlord who now doesn't want to pay you.
It sounds like a pretty scary spot to be as a property manager, where your margin is not exceptionally wide by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even with short-term rentals, where the rate, at least in most tourist areas, are going to be much higher than just a regular long-term rental because there's more work, right? Mm-hmm. So you're looking between 20 and 25% of the revenue generated rather than around 10%, depending on the size, location, and that kind of stuff. But even with that 20, 25%, you get one disaster and the landlord doesn't want to pay and you have to cancel other bookings where all that revenue is going to come in. Where are you going to get the money?
Yeah. Yeah. Where's that cash going to come from? If there are new property managers that are considering taking on their first short-term rental, what's some advice you would give them?
I would certainly suggest really probably talking with an attorney. If you don't have the money to pay an attorney just for a consultation to get an idea of what the things you should be working on, talk to some other property managers in the area, get to know what the kind of pitfalls that they've experienced, things to watch out for, find a mentor, right? Find somebody that's already been through it, has made all of the mistakes, and there's plenty of mistakes to be made in this particular industry.
I love that. Last question for you. What's one thing you wish every property manager understood about short-term rentals before they got started?
I think a lot of people get into it because of the money, but then they realize it's a lot more work than just a standard long-term rental. You may find that you have some very easygoing guests, but I guarantee you will have problems, and you cannot walk through this career field and this profession without that expectation, right? Mm-hmm. You should always be assuming the worst and, expecting the best, but, be ready because it's going to happen. And the most important thing before you reach me is to have all of the evidence and all the documentation. Hey, mm-hmm. on the door, we have this notice, right? Here's the rules. When you book, you get this notification. When you told me about this problem, I immediately responded and told you we're working on it. Hey, I hired this person. I got the receipt, right? Give me the documentation so that I can help defend you. If I don't have any proof and all you're doing is phone conversations with guests, it's not going to be easy. Okay. So as an attorney, that's probably my best piece of advice is make sure to expect the worst, document, and, learn the local rules, right? Don't get yourself into a situation where you said to a real estate investor friend of yours that you've built a lot of trust and credibility with, go and do this. This is great. I'll manage the property for you. And then find out after the fact, after they close, that they can't even do a short-term rental application, which happens.
That'd be a big oof.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all this. Tell me a little bit about how you gained all this knowledge. Tell me about Easler Law. Tell me a bit about yourself. And if people are curious or looking for some help, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah. So I was not a 6-year-old kid who decided I want to become a lawyer when I was older, right? Mm-hmm. Which there's lots of people and there's nothing against that. For me, I like teaching and I like business. So I got my first degree in teaching, became a teacher. Loved the teaching part of it, did not like the salary. So I decided to start up my own businesses. I started up a tech business, biotechnology, biometrics technology business, and, an online training company for adult education, people looking to start careers, worktraining.com. And as I was growing and growing, I was buying real estate with my excess profit because that's what you do when you're looking to try and retire at some point. So I was doing this and I was hiring local attorneys and I really didn't like the stuff that they were coming back with. I would have them prepare a lease and then I was going through as an English teacher and fixing the grammar and the spelling and saying, hey, where's this provision? You don't have this provision. So I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go to law school. I went to law school at night. I graduated second in my class, got out and said, I think there's a market here for investors and entrepreneurs needing legal advice from somebody who's actually been on that side of the table. And so I started up my own practice in a location where I had a tenant do a midnight move on me. Mm. So new office location, ready and available. So I went ahead and renovated it and put my law firm there in Melbourne, Florida. Since then, I've been licensed to practice not only in Florida, but DC and Alaska. And I'm working on the Caribbean, but it's going to take some time on that one. But you can find us on easlerlaw.com, EASLERLAW.com. We do in-person and virtual appointments and happy to help.
Right on. Andrew, thank you again for coming on the show. I learned a ton and really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Colin. Appreciate it.
Right on. Thanks to everybody for listening. We'll catch you all next time.